All right, we're working on the rear wheel well now. So I'm going to show you where to measure, where to make your marks, and tell you the process of making the cuts. So first of all, we're going to start at the bottom, underneath the back end of the fender, the rear fender. So we're gonna measure, take a measurement, starting at the rear wheel well inside the fender, and we're gonna measure forward, going towards the wheel well opening, towards the rear wheel. So I'm gonna take my measuring device. We're gonna put it against the bottom, the very bottom, inside the wheel well, and we'll measure forward 1 3/4 inches. So from that spot forward 1 3/4 inches, we put a mark on the bottom, 1 3/4 inches. So we put a little yellow dot. Okay, so second mark we'll make for the rear fender, we're going to use the body line that lines up almost at the top of the back bumper. So it's the body line that's closest to the top of the back bumper. We're going to come forward to the wheel well where it opens up. We're going to measure from the valley. There's a ridge and then a valley. So from the valley, we're going to measure down to the ground. We're going to measure down, valley point down to 2 1/4 inches. So we'll just make a mark at 2 1/4, which is right where our back fender wheel well is a little bit rusted. So we have some pieces, little pieces missing, but that's okay. We're going to put it right where this bump out is in this rust spot. The 2 measurements we're making for the rear fender flare. We're starting at the bottom. We're going from the inside of the wheel well, where the back of the wheel well starts. Measure from the very bottom edge of the fender and come forward 1 3/4 inches and put a dot at which is right here. Then you take a second measurement outside of the fender of the wheel well. You go off the body line. It's a pretty good body line. It's the one that lines up almost with the top of the bumper. You start at the valley. There's a ridge and a valley. So we'll start in the valley part and we'll measure down from the valley down 2 1/4 inches. And on our Jeep, it's right where this bump out is on our rust spot. So we'll put a mark there. So you have 2 marks. You make a line we're using 1 inch wide painter's tape, blue painter's tape. So we're going to start at the bottom with the tape, and we're going to put the tape line up and line it up with that second mark up higher. So we're just connecting the dots. So we made a mark on the bottom edge at the 1 3/4. We're going to make a mark from the valley of this body line down to we're going to go to 2 1/4. So I'm going to line this top edge up with the valley, which is about there. Doesn't have to be exact. We're just getting as close as we can. Down to 2 1/4, which is right here. I'm going to make a dot with a Sharpie. So it's right there where this bump out is, our rust spot. So now we're going to take a piece of tape. I'm not going to cut it yet. I'm just going to start at the bottom, where our bottom dot is. Bottom dot's yellow. We're going to put the tape on the wheel side of the dot, just so I can see the dot, and I need to be able to move this tape around so I can match it up to the dot up here in our rust spot. So I'm just gonna let it touch that rust spot, or that dot that I made earlier. And again, it doesn't have to be exact, just pretty close. And then this is gonna be, there we go. So our dot is right here behind the tape, right behind this piece of tape, right here. So dot's gonna be right there, right there. The dot. So underneath the bottom of the fender, we've got the yellow dot. The tape is on my right side as I'm looking at it. The tape is on the right side of this dot. Put the tape down. The dots that we're going to, the dot will be on the right side of the tape. So the bottom dot's on the left side of the tape, the top dot's on the right side of the tape. And this makes a line that we're going to cut. This part of the body will be cut off. discarded. And then once we cut that off and discard it, then we'll use the tape line. We're going to cut into the tape to make some cuts so we can bend this part back into the front, into the body. I'm just going to cut straight over. Okay, so we just finished cutting this piece of metal off that we're not going to be using in the back wheel well. We're going to leave the piece of tape on that we used to guide us. We're going to take and we're going to put a second piece of tape on. We're going to put it on the back side, so line it up with the back edge of that first piece of tape. We're going to start at the bottom, put it right up close to the edge, and hold it at the bottom like we did the first time with the marking that we made. And we're gonna go all the way up, and basically we're just following that piece of tape edge up. But really what we're doing is we're going to go all the way up until we find the edge, the tangent of the wheel well. How many of you know what tangent means? Or the edge of the wheel well. Just go up until the tape sits next on the edge of the wheel well. And that is your mark. So what's going to happen now, this is your guide for cutting into your metal wheel well. So we're going to be making cross cuts up to this back edge or the front edge of this new piece of tape that we just put on. So we're going to make cuts up to it. We want to make sure, and we're going to cut into this first piece of tape. We're just going to make cuts into it up to the second piece of tape. Do not cut through the second piece of tape. Just cut through the first up to the second, to the edge of the second. We're going to make several cuts. The first line that we have here is going to be the line we're going to bend. We're going to bend this metal up to make a point where we can attach the fender flare to. So what we're going to do is hold the fender flare up to the opening now, and we're just going to look at where the holes are. There are pre-drilled holes in the fender flare. We're going to look at them and make sure that we're not going to cut in a place where a screw should hold the fender flare, so you can get a general idea. You can see where the fender flare is about where it's going to be, and then just kind of pull it back and make sure you don't make a cut right where those holes are going to be. So there's one hole here at towards the bottom, and there's one hole here at the top. So just make cuts in other places. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Sharpie. I'm just going to get a general idea where the screw is going to be holding the fender flare on, and I'm just going to put a dot there. That way I know not to cut in that area. The bottom one doesn't have a dot, but this gets bent over at the bottom, so I'm just going to put a dot just in the general area where I think it might end up, so we won't make a cut there. Sawzall. I'll start at the bottom. I'm going to make a cut basically where I see a bend in the metal. I'm going to make a cut in that general area. It makes it easier to bend that metal back. Right up to the back side of the second piece of tape. Now my dot's here, so I'm going to stay away from that.
Show your first cut.
So my first cut's right here, and that's about where the bend starts, the body starts to bend. So I want to make it easier for me to bend this in. So I'll just make some more cuts. I make another cut right about here.
So your first drill spot is your dot.
So this dot's going to be about where I first drilled.
How far away are you going to stay from that?
I'm going to stay 1.5 or 2 inches away. I'm probably. It's just a guess. Doesn't have to be exact. Right up to the tape line. Let's see, my next dot is up here. There we go. It's kind of a see what you see and make your decisions based on what you see. But this first tape line is going to be bent back. Grab a pair of channel locks. I need to make another cut down here at the bottom.
Go for it.
I always just kind of peek behind and make sure I'm not going to hit something that's behind. So I made my cuts through the first piece of tape. So you can see my lines in the first piece of tape. I'm just going to use some channel locks. There's a hole that's going to be bent back, but that's where my screw is going to, about where it's going to end up for one of the holes in the fender flare. And I even made a small cut up here up higher. My dots that I'm going to screw into. It's going to be way up high, it's right there. It's above my last cut that I made. So this is a double, this body is double walled, so actually this one's pretty easy to move back with my cuts. Let's see if I can move these inside ones back.
Getting into the rust up there.
It's a little rusty, and I'm sure most of the Jeeps will find a little bit of rust. All of this gets hidden behind the fender flare, so I'm not overly concerned about it looking pretty. Just want it to be as flat as possible so it doesn't push out on the fender flare and make it bulge. It's about as flat as I'm going to get it for right now. I'll peel this tape off a little bit. Let's see what it looks like. Again, doesn't have to look pretty. All this is going to be hidden. It's just making attachment points for the screws on the fender flare. Okay, now we're going to test fit the fender flare. And I usually I'll let Scott get his in where he thinks it should be first. I mean, this will flex a little bit, so where you think you need to be. All we want to make sure is the fender flare is touching the body of the Jeep, and that the bottom edge is going to touch or get close to where those the metal edges that we just created. So the next step will be to drill the holes. You can pre-drill the holes for the screws. They are self-tapping screws, but they don't go through all the metal sometimes. So we pre-drilled the holes, and basically if you have one person holding this up where it's going to end up, and the other person can drill the holes, and then when you pull it down, this bottom edge, or the edge that's closest to the Jeep, will actually have a piece, a rubber trim piece that'll go on. It's very small, but when you pre-drilled the holes, and then you go ahead and put your rubber piece on, it'll actually suck this fender flare up into the Jeep a little tighter, doing in that order. So pre-drill the hole, pull this down, put the rubber trim piece on, then put it back up, and then put your final screws back in. Just do not skip that step. Don't get the rubber piece on first and then drill your holes. Leave the rubber piece off, drill the holes, then put the rubber piece on so it sucks up to the Jeep a little tighter. Okay, so now we're at the step where we're going to hold the fender flare up to where it's going to be attached, and we're going to pre-drill the holes that are inside the fender flare. So there are 8 total holes that are going to be drilled for the back fender flare. The drill bit we're using is 7/64 drill bit. The fender flare kit comes with a little envelope that has the screws with it, so you'll have the screws in your package. And this is the bit I found that works best, 7/64 bit. We'll get started. So just a reminder, before we drill the holes, do not put the rubber trim piece on the fender flare before you drill your holes. So now we're going to hold this up without the trim piece, and we'll drill the holes. So I like to have the front, I'll let Skylar hold the front and get it in place first, and then I push the back in place after he's done. You know where you want to be?
Yep.
Okay. So this is going to go just like that. So I kind of push the fender flare into the Jeep, make sure it's flush. And then I just kind of look where the holes are. And they line up with metal. Yeah. Okay, so now we'll drill holes. Alright, we just finished installing the last of the Sasquatch Fender Flares. I think it went on pretty well. Every Jeep's going to be a little bit different. You'll find rust spots in some places that you won't expect, I'm sure. But you just kind of go along and you make adjustments as you need to, but overall, the process, we'll put out the process that we found helped us, and hopefully it helps you too. Thanks for hanging out with us.